The mother is more okay with therapy. She's more receptive, but the husband, absolutely, he is just does not believe in it. He just thinks it's a waste of time and a waste of money, and kind of that's where the difficulty lies. However, the times and the moments where we've had family sessions, he is cooperative. He's not resistant.
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, and today I'm joined by a group of colleagues to discuss a fictionalized case. Listen in as we look at various aspects of the case, along with treatment recommendations, areas of concern, and ways to look at those gray areas that we often encounter in our field. So let's get started with the case. Paul is a 16-year-old only child with whom you've been working for about 4 months. He's been making great progress with treatment for his anxiety, as evidenced by his increased attendance at school, as well as increased socialization outside of school. Paul's parents, however, are skeptical of therapy, believing mental health diagnoses and related treatment are just the latest trend, and their son's anxiety is just an excuse to get out of the things he doesn't want to do. Paul's parents are both in highly successful careers and believe Paul is not achieving at the level of his capabilities. They think he's lazy and lacks the motivation he needs to be successful in life, and that stricter discipline by themselves and the school is the answer to all of this. At your most recent session, Paul disclosed that he's been using marijuana at night to sleep and on rare occasions also using before school. You're concerned about that Paul's parents will terminate services if you disclose his use of marijuana. And related to that, you're worried that Paul might spiral back down and possibly increase his use of marijuana, other drugs, or alcohol, which he has also just disclosed that he has tried. Okay, so Marlo is our therapist today. I'm going to go ahead. Would you, let's start with clarifying questions. Does anyone have any clarifying questions for Marlo?
Is there a particular culture? Because I feel like that matters.
Yes, Paul is a Black male.
Okay.
Yes, and so one of my concerns was thinking about, because of the marijuana, disclosing this to his parents, because, they're having just general issues about his treatment in general, and not sure, because he's 16, if I should, tell the parents about this. So I was just wondering if I could get your opinion on that.
Any other clarifying questions or any thoughts? Let's start with the marijuana use and kind of go from there, because clearly there's other complexities in this case. And I think Lisa had a really good point about needing to know culture, because certainly there's perspectives that the parents are showing up with that impacting their view of their son.
Mm-hmm.
So Marlo, do you know what the age of consent is in your state?
18.
So
however, I think what my issue was is that, he asked me not to disclose this information, and this is not a suicide or a homicidal situation. So in my state, that is when we are able to disclose any information without the consent of the client.
Yeah, and my state is the same.
Mm.
So
And because the parents are disclosing to me saying that, they feel that he's lazy and not motivated. And I know this could be a product of his use of marijuana. That's where I'm kind of conflicted. And I was going to maybe try to process that with Paul to see if he would agree or he would be okay with his family being involved in this. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I haven't did the discussion yet, though. I wanted to come here first and talk to my colleagues.
Things that we forget, that we don't always have a response in the session. Sometimes we can think, I'm going to consult with some colleagues or consider this more. And I think, Courtney, did you want to say something?
I was just curious, like, what's the relationship with his parents? Does he have a better relationship with mom or dad, or are there other members of his family that he is, and do they, does he feel like he has any support maybe outside of,
well, right now he feels that his parents are extremely judgmental because of the success basically that they have achieved in their own life. Again, this is an African American family, and the parents really work very hard to get to where they are. And the marijuana situation is because he is being influenced by his peers. So if I have to pick and choose, if I have to say, Paul has disclosed to me that he is closer to his mother, but their parents are typically on the same page, but he is a little bit more closer to his mom for sure.
is there a way to explore with the parents more on their perception of therapy? Because I wonder if there isn't more beneath this on lack of trust in the system, understandably lack of trust, and all of that that's completely valid culturally. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to explore that more.
Yeah, I could definitely attempt that because the mother is more okay with therapy. She's more receptive, but the husband, absolutely, he is just does not believe in it. He just thinks it's a waste of time and a waste of money, and kind of that's where the difficulty lies. However, the times and the moments where we've had family sessions, he is cooperative. He's not resistant. So I think I should look at that avenue to do that a little bit more with this situation. And probably I could try to educate on the benefits of counseling and alleviate some of the myth as it relates specifically, especially to the Black culture.
That sounds really promising, with the dad being willing to step outside his comfort zone in that way. Yeah. Is there also a way to, perhaps in a family session, having the parents give more detail to what they consider to his laziness and his all of that, so that you would have a better understanding of what that means, and also that there may be a dialogue could be facilitated by you with them on that?
I think I could definitely go ahead and do that. And maybe even talk about some of the natural biological things that go through teenage bodies. The research has shown that teenagers do sleep a lot more at 16 and 17 years old. They're tired, and things of that nature. And I think that's a really great idea, Lisa, for me to bring that to, the attention, and also get clarification on what is how are they defining that laziness? What actually is he doing?
Yeah. What are their standards?
I will definitely do that. I think that's a really, really great idea, because that would help me clarify what they look at as lazy. Absolutely. Thank you.
Curious, do you have a sense of whether dad, is it more patriarchal? Is dad the decision maker in the family? Are we looking to get his buy-in here? Because we had talked about maybe if he's closer to mom, talking to her, but then that might create other issues within the family or the marriage. Do you have any sense about that?
Yeah, they're both very successful. They're both, contribute to the household financially the same way and things of that nature. Mom is pretty, I wouldn't say that he's the sole decision maker. They're both very strong-willed people with their opinions. So, and he is, and surprisingly, he's, the father is ex-military. So that could probably put certain things into play in terms of his perception on how therapy is and how it could be beneficial for the family. I hope that answers the question.
And being ex-military, there can be, depending upon how long ago he was ex-military, there can be the perception very much reinforced on his negative opinion of therapy. On the other hand, if he's more recently discharged, he is more likely to have been exposed to a shift in cultural thinking within the military, where things like yoga and mindfulness have been introduced into the military culture, and also much more receptivity and support to go into therapy. So it kind of depends upon what his timeline is as being ex-military.
And that is something I do not know. I mean, that's something I definitely would need to explore.
So it's still in the military, but it was a lot more before, that was basically like push through whatever you're struggling with. Like, it just takes hard work and determination and you can accomplish anything you want. And so I agree with Lisa, that would be a good history to have.
Yeah, and he said to me in a session, he's used the terms in the past crazy as it relates to therapy, and because that from the Black culture, that's what it was back. That's what it was. That people grew up in that culture to believe that, oh my God, you're crazy. They would have Uncle somebody upstairs in the room, and when kids would come and they would say, oh, that's just crazy, and so that's what he was initially taught in early childhood.
What were some of the presenting issues at school? Was it attendance? Was it turning in schoolwork? Was it not paying attention? What were the school issues that Paul was struggling with related to his anxiety?
Well, he's doing very well at school, but in terms of his anxiety, he would just, and initially when it was better, as he improved, the anxiety was more him not wanting to speak. If they would call him to do something in class, he would kind of experience shortness of breath and just be really nervous about those things. He would have anxiety with communicating with other children in the past, and he would be late for classes sometimes because he felt that he was so nervous about just going to class, he would delay in going. So things like that he would do.
So there might be some exploration that would be in service here to what is the environment for him in school. And what is his experience? Because it could be, perhaps he's not inherently anxious, but the environment and everything he's experienced has created this dynamic for him.
And he does go to a school in which the expectations are extremely high because he goes to private school.
Yeah.
Well, but and
he's also one of the only Black people in the school.
Sorry?
Also only one of maybe 5 Black people in the entire private school setting.
So those are a number of important dynamics. Yeah.
Yes.
And it sounds like if he's doing well in school, then maybe there's not any issues that you need to screen for neurodivergency. That it's more the anxiety of showing up, the expectations of how he can perform in school, and then also being the only Black student. Not the only, but one of them.
Yeah. So I think, but the marijuana issue, he told me that he started with that with his other friends that are not in his school. So like friends and other family members, like cousins and people around his neighborhood that live right there in the neighborhood. And that's how he started, engaging in marijuana. And he tells me he doesn't do it a lot or anything like that. He told me that he smokes about once a week.
It's less about self-medicating to treat the anxiety. Although if he's using it sometimes at bedtime, then maybe there's anxiety about falling asleep. But it sounds like more it's a social thing, that this is a way to connect with his
Yes.
peers. He's in a different environment with them. He's with students who a lot of them don't relate to them. So this is a way for him to kind of join with those peers.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, that's exactly it. And the once a week when he told me, it's when, he's out and on the weekend type of situation. And then, or his cousins are coming to visit, and it's 100% recreational. He does not engage in smoking marijuana on his own.
Mhm.
He doesn't even get it himself. But again, with, should I, inform the parents about this?
Your concern is that the parents will take him out of therapy
Mhm.
and that he will decline back to where he
Correct.
was.
Yeah, because we have a really fantastic relationship, and he's very open and honest with me. He feels extremely comfortable, 100% professional. And so because of the thoughts of his parents, particularly his father, about, not buying into therapy, if they do know about the marijuana, they may say, well, this is why he's being lazy. Therapy is not working, and so on and so forth, where, that's kind of like the situation.
It will also destroy his trust in you and in the safety of that container that you two have created together. Something that I think is kind of interesting here is that you also mentioned alcohol use. And yet we're focused on, should I tell about the marijuana, where alcohol has done significantly more damage across America than marijuana use has. And we are not talking about, are we going to talk to them about his alcohol use?
Yeah.
And
Leads us into this question of, if this were to increase, if this use were to escalate, now are we looking at a form of self-harm or the potential of self-harm? And while we want to preserve the relationship with this teen because the work is effective, is there a greater issue of, what if he gets tainted marijuana and dies and the parents had no idea he was using? That can be pretty scary.
But if he binge drinks and dies?
100%, yes. Any of those substance uses, yes. In those substance uses, that if he continues to use more, or he has an episode where he just goes on a binge drinking, and there's lots of ways that this child could kill himself using these substances. And how does that play into our decision making about this case?
So I guess from my perspective, where we're at right now, I would monitor it. It would be a yellow light. It would be something I would keep my finger on, and I would focus on the other things that we've talked about in as far as connecting with the parents and fleshing out some of this information and better understanding in the environment of the school and continuing to strengthen the relationship with my client.
Okay.
All great ideas.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
There where we've got legalities as well as some ethics, as well as preserving the therapeutic alliance that you've created. And there's not an easy answer to these. There's no cut and dry answer to these things. Steve, did you want to say something? Are you gathering your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about, like, if there's I guess the concern about, and I fully agree or understand the concerns about the drug use and the alcohol use, but also, like, if he's done so well and learned so many skills, then what are they doing to help him navigate these problems? Like additional working with his family or being in school or those, I'm just kind of curious, like the definition or what he's been able to do or accomplish. And is he using those? Has he managed to be able to use those on his own? I guess is maybe the best way to say it. That's where I'm just really curious, I guess.
You're referring to the skills that Marlo has taught him. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that he's learned. So like he's gotten so much better in therapy. So I'm assuming that he's gotten better in therapy by being able, to manage or do something. And so I'm just curious.
Yeah, mindfulness, he started engaging in breathing. He does enjoy meditation, a little bit of CBT. He knows, of course, with trying to acknowledge his thoughts, negative thoughts, and replacing them. So he's been doing very well with that. And, for the most part, of course, outside of, the marijuana and other things too that he's been engaging in. But those are where some of the things that he was successful at.
Okay.
He has been successful at.
And I guess, does he use those on his own, or does he do, like in different situations that he can?
The only thing he shared with me is that he uses it with his friends. He doesn't use on his own so far.
Okay.
That's what he has shared with me so far.
Yeah. Okay.
Why the consensus here is that you need to monitor his use, continue teaching him skills, continuing to help him understand. This could actually be contraindicated to the progress that he's making in a variety of ways. Plus, it's even if it's legal in your state, it's not legal for a 16-year-old. There's dangers to the brain, some psychoeducation about how the marijuana impacts the brain of somebody at his age.
Well, I'm going to definitely utilize everything that was talked about today, for sure.
Good. Okay. Well, I'd like to shift for a second then, and let's we can give Marlo some support around documenting this, because the documentation piece is important. And we need to document enough to demonstrate what we're dealing with in the case, how we're working with the case, but we also document in a way that we're not providing too many details that if the chart were to get audited are too private, for the client. I think most of us, I was trained that you should have your attorney on one side of you and your client on the other side of you looking at the notes. Both of these people okay with how you're writing those notes. And of course, that puts us in a terrible situation. So Marlo, do you have any thoughts, or does anyone have any recommendations about the best way for her to document this?
Well, I mean, the thing that I currently do, like I would just, continue, when you say how to document, I just document every session, right? So I'm just documenting everything that was addressed per session. There's nothing left out, especially with the marijuana and alcohol use and things of that nature. I think it's important to emphasize, considering this situation, the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And documenting that I've also talked to my colleagues, and these are some of the things that were suggested that will be implemented in that plan.
This would be a case that would be really important to document this consultation, a little bit about the client, who was here today, what was the discussion, what were the discussion points, what were your thoughts as far as moving forward with your treatment plan, signing and dating and putting that in the chart. Because most of us have not been trained to adequately document our consultation. And if, we are taken to court or investigated by our board, they're going to say, how would your colleagues have managed the same case? And so you're demonstrating that you did your due diligence, you did reach to colleagues to get some support on the case. But even further than that, there are some people that would say, process with client use of high-risk behaviors versus stating specifically there was use of marijuana and alcohol and those. And I think some of that is based on your theoretical orientation, your comfort level, the population that you work with. And I think that you could have difficulty with either of those ways of documenting it. If something really bad were to happen, and the parents saw the records and saw that this was there, they don't necessarily understand our clinical judgment or how we come about some of these decisions. And that probably feels a little scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone have any thoughts or suggestions about ways to document this, or how you would go about doing this, just to documenting from this specific session?
I've used, primarily work with adults, but I've always just put down substance use and not been specific about which one. often because my experience has been that they're using more than what they might be telling me. So I would not be very specific in my documentation on, like, other than to just say, discussed use of substances, and that I would have concerns or trying to modify that or manage that with them, discuss that part of it. But again, I come from a background of more adults, so the teenage aspect of it is I would add a potentially different aspect to it.
Do you work with teens?
I did. I actually did my internship in a children's center. And I'm sitting here thinking of some of the parents that have screamed at me because of what they thought I should tell them. And
Right.
It's a very difficult position to be in. It really is.
And it's funny, when we were doing the case consultation, Lisa, when you had mentioned the alcohol, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't finish reading the bottom part. I'm being honest right now. I was like, huh? It was alcohol too? And I'm over here like just throwing all this other stuff out there. And so I apologize for that. I didn't even see that part. I'm only adults. I don't do kids. I don't have experience with doing teenagers, or I am not a substance abuse therapist.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Those things come into play. And it was a pretty detailed case. There were a lot of specific dynamics in there. It was a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But I wanted us to have multiple avenues to really explore with that. So it's all good, Marlo. I told you to take ownership of the case, and that's exactly what you did. So that was perfect. But it does highlight the intricacies of our work and the areas where there are so many gray areas where we aren't given concrete guidance. And this just brings me back to all the ethics trainings I've been in, where they might discuss this case and a case just like this and have us discuss it in a small group. But then say this is the answer, and we are skilled, we are trained, we have lots of education and experience. And so those are the things we have to fall back on. But we also know that maybe a court of law, or a judge, or a set of parents could see this very differently than we do. And so there are higher risk cases at times like this one. And even if you are really skilled, like Lisa, working with children or teens, you've had experiences where your professional judgment helps you decide a certain path, but family members aren't going to necessarily get that. They're going to have their own thoughts and feelings and judgments about how something should be handled.
And also, as a parent, I can totally resonate with the parents' need to know and their concerns and everything that they're bringing to the table, and not having everything, they're bringing their child to me, and, things that are really important that are impacting their child, and they feel that I'm withholding from them. And if I, as a parent, that would be hard for me. It'd be very hard.
Yeah.
So it's holding both of those at the same time. It can be very difficult.
Yeah. And I think we hit on this a little bit, but I think all of us would want to have a really good conversation with Paul about maybe we could help him talk to his parents together about this, and why that would be beneficial, and how we could support him as he's doing this. Because ideally we would want the parents to know Paul to realize this is bad for him, and he continue in therapy, right? That's sort of like the preferred outcome. But getting to that place is hard, and it doesn't always work out the way we desire it to.
Yeah. And he's a teenager.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
His brain is not fully formed. He is not capable of making good decisions, even decisions.
And 16-year-olds sleep a lot. They do
sleep a lot. Yes, absolutely. And they also can be defiant, and his parents have expectations. They worked hard. They've been successful. They likely view that they've made his life easier for him, that they've made his life easier for him than they had it. And therefore there might be some resentment here that he doesn't appreciate what he's been given. And that's just a guess. That could be a dynamic. Maybe it's not. But there's lots of different ways parents and teens can butt heads.
Yeah. And I think also in here is the inherent systemic racism that dad has experienced his whole life and wants his son to do really well in a society where you're constantly swimming upstream, no matter how hard you work.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much is just pure concern and love for his son that they really want. That's really important to help them have every opportunity.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we all want that for our children, but when you're in a society that you recognize puts limits just by virtue of your skin color, I think that would be, I mean, I can only speak as an outsider, but I could see how that could really drive you to drive your kid, because you really want them to have that opportunity and to be able to achieve and to, you know, all of those things. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially with his family, apparently I threw all that other jargon in. I just was making stuff up. But
you
yeah,
did great. You
right.
did great.
Yeah, you did a great job, Marlo. And that also kind of brings to mind for me, like, can we help the parents explore that, okay, this is a high achievement academic program that seems like a good fit for him, but there's not diversity there. So
Yes.
do they need to consider exploring another option? You know, an option where there's more diversity and maybe the academics aren't as highly challenging, but can they supplement that in other ways
Yeah,
so that he's in a setting that is a better fit for him on a lot of different levels?
yeah, I agree.
And also maybe facilitate possibly a dialogue between father and son with father's experience and feeling like an outsider and maybe not fitting in, and you know, that the son could see that dad also may wear very different clothes than that, you know, the school, you know, that he's in, but they could possibly open a dialogue there of connection on what it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say you did a great job with presenting the case and all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That for
Yes.
me didn't just looking at the alcohol.
You did
feeling
great.
some type of way about that. Like,
No, there's a lot of details on that case. I probably should have put some bullet points in the summary for you to make it a little bit easier. I just also want to say that were we discussing somebody's actual case, and we're sort of doing this a little bit now with Marlo, that we are affirming that these are hard decisions, these are complex cases, the toll that it's taking on her, the insecurity she might be feeling. This is the type of case that imposter syndrome can really rear its head. And sometimes with cases like these, we feel embarrassed or afraid of getting consultation because sometimes people have really specific ideas about how to handle a case like this. They see our work in black and white and not the grays that we are experiencing. So we absolutely would want to be providing that emotional support for Marlo as well, and just normalizing how hard these types of cases are.
Yes.
why don't we do adults?
Well, unfortunately, lots of
cases
people,
too, though. They have hard cases too, though.
they do, but there is such a difficult dynamic when working with children and teens that is a reason that a lot of people in our field eventually discontinue working with children and teens, because you've got this whole other dynamic with the family coming into play. And I, for one, have taken that path. For a variety of reasons, I no longer work with children or teens, and I have so much respect for the people that continue to do that work, because I remember how hard it was. Adults can be hard work as well, but it's a different type of dynamic that you're bringing into play here.
Yes.
Absolutely. I definitely have a lot of respect for those who do that. Like, that's all they do is teach kids and teens and families. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Braver people than me.
You know, and I think, you know, I think everybody is suited for something. You know, somebody is always gifted in a specific area. People used to always tell me, they're like, how could you do hospice? I'm like, how could I not? How could I not help somebody transition at the most intimate level of their life?
And Marlo, for hospice, I'm the opposite of what you do, because I work with children in pediatric hospice. And I would say I could never do adult hospice because you got this sibling fighting with this sibling, and you got this person over here worried about their inheritance. And with children, truly, everyone is coming together in the best interest of that child in a way that can be beautiful and magical. And so I'm always like, people are like, oh, how do you do kids? I'm like, how do you do adult?
Yeah, I'm like, how do you do kids? No, how do you do peds hospice? No.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say that we all find our sweet spot where our gifts are and our skills are in the areas that we, I think for most of us, we find a niche that feels like a calling for us. And the work is hard, but it feels good when you can help someone in a way that, they couldn't otherwise be helped or supported.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you, everyone, for your insightful thoughts and suggestions today. I so love these clinical consultations because they really highlight what happens in a group consultation, that we can come together in a respectful way, talk about the difficulties, the nuances, the legalities, the ethics, all of those things without shaming anyone, without making someone feel like they're a failure. It's really hard work that we're doing. And so I do really appreciate everyone's participation today. For everyone listening, there are new episodes of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast released every Thursday on all major platforms. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely.
Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.